meeting. Roll call will indicate that at this time, I'm not sure if Mr. Tim is on or not. All other members are present. And you have for your pleasure the agenda.
Mark will support the agenda as presented.
I second.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the agenda? Call the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Here we have the review of the minutes of the previous meeting.
Move to approve.
Yeager,
Second.
second. Any other discussion on the minutes? All question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Public comment. Okay, be quiet. I guess with that, we will go ahead.
Okay. We'll keep the report short so we can get to the stuff that everybody's here for. So I passed out the authorization position count in front of you. Again, as you know, the highlighted ones are the current vacant positions that we're working through. Let's give you a minute to look at those. And then attached to the back of this is our listing of positions that we filled so far this year on the green sheet, and then positions that have resigned, retired, terminated, or et cetera.
That Amy Livingood, she's been retired or resigned quite a while now.
She's still with us. She
Oh.
moved into that accounting supervisor position. So that's the third one down. Amy's in that position. She was originally hired as an accountant and now is in that supervisory role. And this is the vacant position Heidi's talked about at finance that is being held open for the time being to offset some audit services expenses.
You're gluing my pages together.
Fresh hot off the press.
What does the E represent again?
What does the what?
E.
Oh, exempt. So
Oh,
they're
exempt.
salaried positions. Yep.
Anybody have any questions? It would appear what I'm hearing is that if we do have an opening, there's probably a few more people applying than there has been a few years ago.
Yep, I would say we've got more applications and probably better quality applicants than we've had probably a year ago, I would say. So, and you sit on some interviews, others of you sitting on interviews, you probably see some of that.
Yeah, it was interesting how many more people are applying. And not saying they're all top notch, but
So the other big thing on our report, which we've talked about at our last meeting, I just wanted to mention is health insurance. We know that we're gonna have to make an adjustment to health insurance premium or plan design or things like that. We're working with Jay Scott, who you've met before, with USI, who's our insurance consultant, to try and negotiate some better rates for us. So we won't have that information. We're gonna be meeting this afternoon, but we're pushing that out a week so that we can hopefully give him a little more time to do that. But that will come back for either at our September meeting, or maybe there's a need to have a special meeting to go over that, because it will have a significant budget impact that's not reflected in the budget documents that you've seen through some of your committees. So for example, here at the Sheriff's Department, that is not factored in. So we know we'll have to go back and make some adjustments to do that. So Heidi and I have been in communications about that. She's aware that's coming and what that impact will be. We'll know probably in another week or so.
Another question, Minnie. What's the difference in color? There's some are yellow, some are gold.
Oh, so the yellow are all currently vacant. If it's a new position, like this one on the bottom of page 2, that was a position that was approved for the 2025 budget that hasn't been filled yet. And I know in child support, Diane's been focusing on filling some of the existing positions, vacancies, and then this position I know they're working on. she's had more than one to fill, so I believe that one is in the works. And then any position that you see that has a little red parentheses after it, either that's a part-time FTE, falls in the part-time category, or if it's like on page 5, we see somebody in corrections not starting till the 11th. So that's kind of our way of tracking new people coming in. So you can see on page 6 too, we have a dispatch position. That was a new position that's just not been able to be filled yet, so that's on here. One thing I just want to mention too, Jed on the bottom of page 9, it starts public health and then on and over to page 10. He has a new position, environmental health specialist. That was for 2025, a part-time position, 0.5 FTE. He has submitted a letter requesting that position continue for the 2026 budget, even though it's currently vacant. He's had some other turnover in environmental health specialist positions, so he's focused, just like corporation counsel and child support, filling the existing positions before filling that position. So when we put out the request for new positions and reclasses, we say if anybody's got a position that's been open for 6 months or more, by policy, they're required to let us know if they intend to keep that. Otherwise, it falls off the chart. So land and water, for example, still on page 10, the last position that's in orange there, that was a new position that was grant funded. That has been pulled from their, I don't know what the funding source is on, but that's been pulled. So you'll see that one come off for 2026. That's not in the budget that he submitted.
And it really worked out well because it could have cost us money.
Right, or result in layoffs, so. That's our color coding system, so we keep it all square. Once we go live with Workday, we'll be able to pull this organizational chart up onto the computer, so you'll be able to see it and in more of a table of organization structure. So we'd be able to show you what positions are vacant. So we still may hang on to this for a while just as a security blanket, but eventually it'll all be automated and we won't have it in a spreadsheet format.
Since you brought up Workday, where are we at?
We were originally going to go live here in September. However, we've had 2 cycles of what they call parallel payroll, looking at, how we're matching up. And had we not extended it, because now we extended it begins just the middle of December for the pay period paid on January 9th. That allows us to print W-2s and everything through our existing system, which we felt as we got through payroll was a better option to go, just because some little issues that had come up as we're going through that. So we should be all set to go live, would be beginning December 21st for the check paid in January 9th, which would be first for next year. So yep, we're moving along. We're in the phase they call right now end-to-end testing. So we're testing from the time somebody gets hired, works through the whole system, enters time, gets paid, and so on. And then making sure that all flows through the integrations, the banking settlement, the accounting, the general ledger, all of that. So that's where we're at. It's a lot. It's a lot that we had anticipated, but I think in the end, the product will be good.
Before Mandy goes to point number 2, there are new positions. I just want to make just a comment. I mean, I know you're all aware that the county does not have unlimited sources of money. But on the other hand, it's not that we as a committee here aren't sympathetic to what's going on either. And then thirdly, we want to keep employees also. So we want to make sure they get a reasonable increase in salary, otherwise they're not going to stick around either. So it's a complicated situation. I just want to make sure you're.
Mandy, I have a question.
Yep.
A little birdie told me that there was a policy, it is a policy for the county, if a position is not filled, that it is taken off of the organizational chart. If
So-
it's not filled within 6 months.
So that's
Is there a policy
Yep,
that
the policy-
specifically states that?
that if a position is vacant for more than 6 months, the department has to submit something to us to decide whether or not we
Okay.
continue funding that position. So Jed, for example, is one
Right.
that had let us know that, you know, because of recruitment, he wants to continue that position. It's a half-time position. Brian let us know that that position's coming off the table of organization, but yes, that's a policy then to be reviewed here. So right now, it's the
So how
child
many
support.
can come off of this, or none of them?
So those are the orange ones. So if we just went through this, the bottom of page 2 is that child support position that was approved for for this year's budget. She has had turnover in there, so she's not been able to get to filling that position, but we're in the process for that. So that one's in the works. Then you get to page 6. That's a dispatcher position, and I know that the sheriff's department has had some conversation about Heidi, about keeping the position on the table. I don't know if I can speak to this, keeping the position on the table of organization, but not funding it in the budget. Only because obviously this is a new position from 2022 that we
Right.
just have had other turnover and FTE programs and filling those positions that we haven't got to it. So I think, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Kevin?
So it takes about 6 months to train a dispatcher. So we know that we're just physically, they're not, those 2 spots, we're not gonna be able to get somebody hired and trained.
Mhm.
You know, you can only hire or train so many at a time. So we're just not gonna be able to hire that many this next calendar year.
So from a funding perspective, that one's not being funded. And actually, I believe you said 2 positions that you had talked to Heidi about not funding, just because the likelihood is we won't be able to get those filled. Then all of these others that are in yellow have not been vacant for the more than 6 months. On page 9, the speech therapist position that was approved previously, that's a 0.75. They had originally had that as a contracted position with DHS. Then they weren't able to fill it there, just that's a very difficult position to find folks that are qualified to do speech therapy, and that's something that they have to have. So we converted that to a county position through the budget process previously and still have not been able to find anybody there. So that's that one. The environmental health position on page 10, that was one that Jed had submitted that they would like to continue. The watershed technician position on page 10 that Brian had, like I said, that one's dropping off. Highway on page 11 has a vacant equipment operator 1 position that has been open for a while.
So that's staying?
For the time being, I believe they're just working through trying to get those positions filled. Now, in highways and enterprise fund, that doesn't necessarily impact the levy that we're looking for operating.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good question. So that's all I'll touch on for the monthly report. Our focus has obviously been on new position request. You ready for that? Okay. So I passed out in front of you a sheet, it's 2 pages, front and back. The front page is the new position requests. The second page is reclassification request, which that's per closed session discussion under 1985 1C, because we're talking about individual people. Where this particular presentation on the front page is your new position request. So we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, and I'll just walk through them first and then explain to you kind of my thought process and where I've got the highlighted ones. So the first at the top of the list is the 3 patrol officer positions for court security. So those positions are listed there. We talked about that last month, and your direction was to go and meet with the judges, talk with law enforcement about those. Is there any other form of implementation or something that we can do to be able to maybe reduce this or look at a phased-in approach? They feel that this is the phased-in approach. You know, they had originally talked about more positions than that. This accommodates the 3 courtrooms. And then the conversation with the judge was that should court not be in session in the afternoon, or if there's a vacation or so on, these folks would either do their training during that time or be utilized to fill slots in patrol so that those folks can attend training, or they're definitely open to these folks then being able to do some courthouse 600 building security if there's availability. So I don't know, Kevin, I Sheriff, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit more or add anything, but
What was
those
it?
are,
I'm curious what the hourly rate is.
give me a second here.
It didn't pop up there.
Yep.
I
So
didn't,
these would be union positions and find my scale here.
Doesn't say it.
So for 2026, the starting rate of pay for a patrol officer is $33.74. Depending if the person comes in with some experience on the contract, what happens if they have 3 to 5 years full-time experience, we hire them at step 1, but after they complete their field training program and they determine that they're qualified, obviously, to do the position and have the right amount of experience, then by contract, they would move to step 3, which would be the $37.20. So mostly what we've been hiring here are brand new folks in that court security area. With the exception, I think, of Pat Horschel's is filling the temporary slot that we have now.
What was your question, Andy?
We were just talking about the direction from last month's meeting was to go back and have a meeting with the judges and law enforcement to talk about, was there any other approach other than 3 full-time positions to be able to cover that courtroom security? And so I was just saying that we don't feel that that's an option right now based on that conversation. So I was just saying, is there anything you want to add to that? If not, that's fine too.
No, just that we're prepared for the meeting. We have a PowerPoint that's already been put together. It's pretty comprehensive, so it'll explain everything that the officers will be doing when there is no court in session, so. And then that'd be just a pile of questions come in and we can answer all those. So you have a court date for that?
So we had talked about preliminary, I had shared with Dave that we had the conversation that we'd like to have a county board presentation about the courtroom security. Because I think after having that meeting, I've learned a few things too, as far as what those folks will be doing. So we looked at that being sometime in September, hopefully the September county board meeting, but if not, if we had to hold something separate, Dave was open to having that separate meeting so that we can have that information. I know originally I talked about a special meeting October 23rd, but being I believe that's a Thursday or Friday, and then the budget is read the following Tuesday. I think that's just too close of a time period to be able to have that presentation. It'd be nicer to have that information in September so it can be thought about. So that I put at the top of the list just because that seems to have been a priority discussion that has happened, over the course of the last year. The need for courtroom security, and then of course the letter that's come from the judges about that request. So the reason I had that in yellow is because I kind of tried to prioritize these just from your discussion, like you had said, Dwayne, about whether or not what we can focus on for next year and still be able to give our employees an increase. The Sheriff's Department took off their requests, the patrol officer positions for recreation officers and the IT technology position. So those are no longer on the discussion. And then the next few of these are through Health and Human Services. The first one is a behavioral health therapist position full-time for 2026. There is funding, but only for a portion of that position. So that's why I have it in gray here, just so that you know that that's not a fully funded position. So there would need to be operating levy for that position. In conversations with Mary, I don't know exactly what that percentage is, but it's not fully funded. The second position is a grant they received. I believe it's for 3 years, beginning as early as 10/1 of 2025. It's 100% grant funded position. We know that it's sunsetted, which will mean that should the funding not be renewed, that this would be a decision then that they would have to make, just like Brian had to make in Land and Water, whether or not they would continue to fund that position. So that one I had in yellow just because it's fully funded. Then the next one is an economic support position. They had talked about expanding from 26 hours to 30 hours. There is the the need for that potentially to be a full-time position. In discussions with Mary, decided to put that position on hold and evaluate in the mid part of next year as to whether or not that would be something they would continue to need. It's only partially funded. So there again, I have it grayed out as only partially funded, and then also to put that one on hold. The next is 2 CLTS case managers. They had requested 2 CLTS case manager positions and 1 lead worker position, which I had listed on the, we'll talk a little bit more when we get to reclassifications. But I had listed on here 2 CLTS two case managers / social worker, depending what qualifications they come with. That is 100% reimbursed, and there's a lot of funding coming through for these CLTS positions. We added 2 positions in 2024, so none for last year, but that was requested for the 2024 budget. So here again, they're requesting those positions, 100% reimbursed, so no operating levy. I have that in yellow. Then the ADRC is requesting a program assistant for transportation. This is a grant that they're in the process of applying for. They have requested that the request remain there. However, they would pull it if the grant funding wasn't approved, and that would be 100% funding for that position. So that one sort of is on hold too, waiting to hear whether or not we get funding for that position. And the next 2, the district attorney's office is requesting a full-time legal assistant position. That's as a result of their receipt of a new ADA for their office. So that position is listed there. There's no funding for that position for operating, so that's why I have that one listed in gray. Then branch 1 is asking for a combination of a reorganization that involves some reclasses, which we'll talk about in closed session. But the net request there is that they add a 30-hour-a-week deputy register and probate position, and that would be listed on here at a cost of $58,464. So then no funding associated with that. So my thoughts in putting this together is to focus on what has funding. You know, obviously there's needs here that departments wouldn't have requested positions if they didn't have that need. But then I also know that there's departments that have a need but didn't request positions, knowing that the difficult budget situation that we're in. So whatever your wishes are, this is the list that we compiled. And again, my focus would be on those that have 100% funding and those that obviously the court security has been talked about for some time. So I don't want to negate that one, but there is not operating fund levy for that.
So, just to recap what you said, the last 2 on the sheet there, what are you kind of saying? I mean, there's no funding, I understand.
Yeah, and I understand CAT has a need. I understand that the probate office has a need. I did meet with Judge Nielsen and talk with him about that and what their needs are there. I'm not saying that they're not needed. I'm just saying if the more we add to the operating levy, you're talking about either eliminating across the board increases, cuts to other departments, you know, across the board increases, you know, steps, whatever it may be. So my thoughts in putting this together are these yellow are the ones that I think rise to the top of the list, partly because there's funding and partly because I know we've talked about court security for some time.
So if we go along those lines of thinking, then Heidi would place them in the budget, so to speak, and see what it looks like.
So the recommendation would
Potentially.
come from this committee as to what you want to do. And then that would go to finance and Heidi would look at, these are the requests as to whether, how they would be accommodated, what the repercussions of that are, et cetera. So.
Can I just make a comment question? So our request is twofold. We have the request for the position. We also put in a request for reclassification. I understand and respect the budget. I get it. There's only so much money to go around. So if we're not going to be, you know, I get it. We're not funded. We don't, unlike the other positions we've come forward, we don't have state funding for it. If the full-time employee isn't funded, we would ask for extra consideration then on the reclass, because we're still getting that extra attorney, we are still going to have that extra work. And that's going to then be an extra burden on the legal, all of the support staff that are still in the office. So I respect not, if you decide not to give us the position, I would ask that you take into consideration a little bit more weight for our reclassification request for the extra work that the staff will have after that.
It's gonna be harder to retain those employees if we're asking them to do more work.
With no extra pay, you mean?
Correct.
Yeah, with no any kind of consideration.
And your part of your question is, we'll be taking that up in the closed session.
Yes, so, but I won't be here for that. So
Oh,
that's
okay, okay.
I presume I can't be here for that, so that's why I'll ask now. I'll make my plea.
I know what you're doing, okay.
Okay,
I just wanna make sure everybody else.
thank you.
And I respect the comment and mentioning it, because in general, as I've observed the county over the years I've been on the county board, most departments don't come forward to ask for things they don't need, in general. So I respect. Okay, what's the committee's, our trying to Mandy, then those in yellow are the things that we would kind of, if we agree on this, to move forward to give to finance.
I'll make the motion, we move on this. As stated.
Okay.
And like she says, we got the one with program assistant transportation, that penny grant is funding, we just cut off the list if we don't have the funding.
I'll second it.
Thanks. Yeah, the difficult, one of the more years, it's been more difficult than the last couple. Unfortunately.
And that's not to say we can't
Oh,
revisit
right.
this later in the year if we find out
Right.
we're in a better financial position than we currently think we are. Hopefully we can come back and
Yeah, because they're not gonna go away.
Nope.
Or some of these aren't, right?
And persistent.
That's good. Any other discussion before I call the question? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion's carried.
And I just, not to tell you what your motion is, but pending further approval by the finance
Finance,
committee.
yeah,
right,
Okay,
right.
I assume that's what it was.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, that's.
Yeah, no, we don't have the authority to.
Yeah, no, I was discussing.
Okay, anything else under that before we go into closed session, Mandy?
Nope, I don't have anything else.
Again, if I would appreciate if somebody would read verbatim.
pursuant to Wisconsin State Statutes 19.85, subsection 1, subsection G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation which is or likely to become involved. 2026 reclassification requests and Krager versus Wapaka County et al., et cetera. I make that motion.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Federowitz.
Yes.
Seuss.
Yes.
Morak.
Yes.
Yeager.
Yes.
Okay, we are in
I'm just
closed
gonna
session.
stop the live
Thanks.
stream again.
I'm assuming she's from.